My name is Emily Ann Ramos, and I am with SB at Home and the SB at Home Action Fund. We are proud to host this. We are proud to be hosting this forum, and we would like to remind everyone that SB at Home works for a future where all Santa Clara County residents have a safe, stable, and affordable home, and that Palo Alto City Council's constituents include all Palo Alto residents, both housed and unhoused. I ask that everyone be respectful of that. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the indigenous peoples of the Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush Ohlone, Tamian Nation, and Amamutsin, on which we are learning, working, and organizing today. We are committed to honoring and making visible the indigenous people and tribes that were intentionally displaced from their land, who remain here in Silicon Valley and are part of our community. Now, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank our co-hosts. Our forum tonight is co-hosted by our amazing partners, Palo Alto Forward, the Palo Alto Renters Associations, Destination Home, Greenbelt Alliance, Housing Choices, the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's forum, Robert Chung, Secretary of the Board for Palo Alto Forward.
Thank you, Emily. Tonight, we're honored to be joined by 7 candidates for Palo Alto City Council. Our candidates tonight are Alex Comsa, Lisa Forssell, Brian Hamachek, Ed Lauing, Julie Lythcott-Haims, Doria Summa, and Vicki Veenker. Before we begin, let's review the rules and expectations of tonight's forum. We'll first hear an opening statement from each candidate. Then we'll move into the main event, Q&A. And finally, we'll hear a closing statement from each candidate. All candidates will have an opportunity to answer every question. The candidates tonight have had the questions for more than 24 hours, so they have had time to consider their responses. Candidates have been asked to not critique, respond to, or engage with their fellow candidates during this forum. There will not be an opportunity for rebuttals. We've asked the candidates to keep comments focused on the issues, the job, the city, and most importantly, themselves. In particular, the experience and ideas that they hope to bring to the City Council this fall. Opening statements, question responses, and closing statements will each be limited to 1 minute. This 1-minute time limit will be strictly enforced, and to keep us on track, I'll be providing a soft 10-second warning for each candidate towards the end of their answer. To begin, each candidate will share a 1-minute opening statement. I'd now like to invite our first candidate, Alex Comsa, to deliver his opening statement. Alex?
Yes, thank you for hosting. My name is Alex Comsa. I'm a father, an immigrant, small business owner, raised by a single mom. Moved to the United States 25 years ago and in Palo Alto since 2010. I have two kids in the school district. We moved to Palo Alto for a couple of reasons. First, for diversity of the community. 35% of Palo Alto consists of immigrants, and we really, really enjoy the diversity and the exposure to so many cultures. It's also a great fit to build a family. The second one would be the sense of community, and I'm really, really privileged to be living and working in Palo Alto. And I truly feel like I belong to this community. And
10 seconds.
Like this experience to be felt by essential workers, and I will address that in my.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Next up, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lisa Forssell, and I am running for a welcoming, sustainable, and affordable Palo Alto. What that translates into for me as campaign priorities is housing, building new homes of all sizes to welcome new folks and support those already here. Number 2, transportation options, bike infrastructure, shuttles, and ties to regional transit. Number 3, climate, modernizing neighborhoods to convert to clean electric power over natural gas. I've served as a commissioner on the Utilities Advisory Commission for 6 years, including 2 as chair. I have over 20 years of experience in technology and creativity at Pixar and Apple, where I am known as someone who lifts up the team and delivers the project. I have a master's degree in environment and resources and an MBA from Stanford. I'm passionate about public service, and I'm excited to serve. I'm proud to be endorsed by local leaders, including County Supervisor Joe Simidian, State Assembly Member Mark Berman, Mayor Pat Burt, and Council Member Allison Cormack. I'm really pleased to be here tonight and looking forward to a good conversation.
Thank you. Next up, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this. I was born and raised in Palo Alto, lived here pretty much my entire life. While I've been here, I've lived in 5 different neighborhoods all over the city. I've rented an ADU, I've rented in an apartment complex. Now I own my own home. So I have a pretty broad background of what it's like to live here. And I think that housing is definitely the issue of this campaign. It's a critical time for Palo Alto. If we get this right, it's going to make Palo Alto even better. If we get this wrong, let's just not get it wrong. It is the issue of this election. So I'm really excited to dive into these questions tonight. Thanks.
Next up, Ed. Ed, I think you're on mute.
We're back on mute instead of in chamber, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, so I really thank the multiplicity of hosts. I like the mixed hosts that are here today. I've been on the Planning Commission for almost 6 years now, a couple years as chair, and my core passion in that entire time has been around finding new ways to really create truly affordable housing for lower income residents and then retain these new neighbors for their whole lifetimes. A couple years ago, I was appointed to the Housing Element Working Group. As you know, that group represents many population segments, and the idea is for them to start the process of thinking about what housing needs to be in the future and where the site should be. And I wanted to be in the planning process early, so that's why I wanted to be on that group. Cheryl Klein and I were elected by them as co-chairs, and it's really been a phenomenal partnership in the last 18 months as we work through this and immersed ourselves in the complex assignment with a really good group. The process worked. And the housing element is a plan. When it's approved by the state, it's up to council to execute. So I'd like to be one of those council members who execute.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Next up, Julie.
Hi, everyone. I'm just coming out of my Palo Alto weekly endorsement interview. I believe I was the first to go, so it's going to be great. I'm Julie Lythcott-Haims. I'm a mom of 2 gun graduates. I came here in 1985 when the traffic lights on El Camino began blinking red at about 10 p.m. Been a homeowner here since 2000 in a 3-generational house. With degrees from Stanford, Harvard Law, and California College of the Arts, I have the mind of a lawyer, the heart of a humanist, and a breadth of experience across numerous nonprofit boards, including many right here in Palo Alto. I also have a track record of listening deeply, helping groups set an inspiring vision and galvanizing people toward reaching that vision, which is exactly what our current gridlock on housing requires. I do a lot of work on equity, about how to be our best selves, and have been asked 2 years in a row to give a keynote to Santa Clara County professional staff as part of their professional development efforts each summer. I've been honored to be invited to serve my county.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm ready to step up and serve my city.
Thank you. Next up, Doria.
Hi, thanks for inviting me here today. So I have 15 years of service to Palo Alto through my work with neighborhood associations, city boards and commissions, and I'm currently vice chair of the Planning and Transportation Commission. This work has led to countless opportunities to interact with a wide range of Palo Alto residents, young and old, newly arrived, long established renters and owners. It's easy to enumerate the aspects of the city that we love: schools, walking and biking, canopy, parks. These are not accidents. They're legacies from Palo Alto citizens who devoted their time and energy to ensure the future generations could live in such a great place. Tonight, we'll be discussing some important issues facing the city. My approach will always be residents first, improving the experience for residents, enhancing the present conditions, and laying the groundwork for the future and welcoming new residents. I believe it's our job to protect the legacy created by to maintain a beautiful, livable, healthy city. Thanks.
Thank you. And our last candidate to share an opening statement will be Vicki.
Thank you. You know, I'm getting more optimistic about getting more housing in Palo Alto. Listening to residents, fellow candidates, and city officials, I hear a growing consensus around increasing our housing supply and more interest in making sure our new neighbors have access to parks and green spaces and tree-lined streets just like we do. There's substantial agreement on affordable housing and looking out for renters. And there's a recognition that being strategic about where we live can reduce transportation needs, which reduces traffic, which helps with climate action. But we have to do this with an equity lens. I've spent 20 years on the board of the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, which provides free legal representation to low-income families on housing matters. A fellow board member sent us Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law, and it's a tough read because it calls out redlining and racially restrictive covenants right around here. I'm committed to ending exclusionary land use and to pursuing fair and equitable housing throughout our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into our main question and answer section, where each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. The first question is as follows. Under state law, every city must regularly update their housing plan, known as their housing element. To meet its legal obligations, Palo Alto must plan for over 6,000 new homes to be built between 2023 and 2030. What zoning, development standards, and approval practices in Palo Alto should be changed to spur creation of more affordable housing for people of all incomes? The first candidate to answer this question will be Lisa Forssell. Lisa?
Hi, thanks. I am very interested in using the tool of specific area plans for the many areas that should be redeveloped, including the downtown transit area, downtown retail areas, town and country area, Carverly, city-owned parking lots, El Camino, San Antonio, and more. We do need to allow for some increased density, which will mean somewhat taller buildings, somewhat larger floor to area ratios, and especially in areas close to transit, reduced parking requirements. One of the reasons that we need the extra height is that in each of the areas being developed, we need to make sure we have green space and good bicycle access and access to all the amenities that the other parts of town enjoy. We can spell this out in a specific area plan. We also really need to streamline our permitting practices. Those who build housing need predictability. With specific area plans that spell out our requirements, developers will know that they'll be able to move forward without endless meetings and revisions. And as we develop, we definitely need to add transportation options like shuttles, bicycle access to relieve the pressure on the roads and to make it easy for those who don't want to own a car to be able to skip it.
Thank you. Next up will be Brian.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of things that the city can do to help spur affordable housing development. And it begins with reducing a lot of the red tape and the fees, making it easier for them to get their plans to be considered. And I think also the city can offer financing, even if it's a small amount. It helps spur other organizations. It's kind of a badge of approval. I do support in certain areas and when appropriate, relaxing height restrictions or density requirements. But I think that needs to be done really carefully and only where it makes sense in the city to be done, and not no blanket policy change. I think the specific area plans that Lisa was talking about was also makes a lot of sense and is a good way to tackle specific areas of the city to spur affordable housing.
Great. Thank you, Brian. The next candidate will be Ed.
Thanks. There's already a document out there, which is a draft housing element. And that went through a lot of work with the housing element working group and planning and then council. There's all kinds of stuff in there in terms of how to do this differently, including the housing incentive program, which we worked twice in the PTC and it was liberalized some more. We added the Palmer fix for the first time, which allows 15% of inclusionary housing for renters, not just purchase, which had not been done before. There are a lot of specific concessions on all affordable projects. And of course, we have the existing PHZ loan zoning law, where you can basically negotiate directly with council on what you want to build. So the housing element is there. We found the sites and we've got programs built in to make this happen.
Thank you, Ed. Next up will be Julie.
I believe cities are for people and the entire city needs to own this challenge together and feel good about it. I'd like to see coordinated area plans or specific or precise plans. I'm still learning the differences between them as an outsider. For a number of regions to have hundreds of units, Cal Ave, downtown San Antonio, Palo Alto Transit, portions of El Camino, and Cubberley. I'd love to use the beautiful SOFA development from 20 years ago as our guide, and I'd love to start with Cubberley. We need to raise height limits throughout the city, increase density, ease up on the parking restrictions, expedite approvals, build largely market rate with 20 or even 25% BMR if it pencils out. What I'm most excited about, though, is empowering homeowners to be part of the solution with SB 9 lot splits, whether they create for family, friends, put it on the market, or create affordable. Rather than building brand new large structures, which are going to take many years, than finding tenants, SB 9 allows us to get new housing supply in a dramatically faster and less expensive way and earn income for families. I'd even encourage each block to put up a fourplex and distribute the impact fees to neighbors because, well, they were the ones impacted.
Thank you, Julie. Next up will be Doria.
Thank you very much. And just a word to everyone. We lost a beloved family pet yesterday. So if I'm a little distracted, please forgive me. So affordable housing. So there's two kinds of affordable housing. There's housing that's naturally affordable, and there's deed restricted affordable housing. So they're two different pots. So what I want to say about that is affordability is not created by zoning. And zoning can't fix affordability. That being said, there are things we can do, and we have done them. As Ed mentioned, we have a housing element that found all the sites for all the units we need, and it did so by adjusting policy and programs in the city to incentivize housing. The PHZ, which is a planned community zoning where each will be its own, would be a good way to start. But I would also say that we have some failures. We had a workforce housing overlay that has the most expensive housing, rental housing per square foot in the city. I will say it's at 120 units per acre, being on a half-acre site and only 50 feet high.
Thank you. Next up will be Vicki.
Yeah, so to get to this number, we should use a lot of tools in parallel with zoning and approval practices. So a couple of zoning ones. We should upzone density for 100% affordable housing. It could be a great incentive to get developers to build that type of housing. But let's look more broadly at all kinds of housing, and let's allow it in commercial areas and upzone it for an increased FAR relative to commercial to incentivize housing. And let's look at approval practices and streamline them. Let's use those comprehensive area plans that people have talked about, like our neighboring cities, so that we can give developers confidence before they ever step to the drawing board that something will get approved. The pre-screening of discretionary projects like PHZs at council is great. Perhaps we could even have joint meetings of the ARB and the HRB to make things go more smoothly. I think the point is that we want to try a lot of different things so that we can move things along, get to yes, and get more housing up for people.
Thank you. The last candidate to answer this question will be Alex. Alex?
Yes, I think we are talking about affordable, not more affordable, as you phrase it. You know, we've been dealing with ADUs, SB9 now for a few months, and that's definitely not going to help with affordable housing pool. Had a meeting just earlier today with Jonathan Late, the director of planning, and if you were to guess how many SB9 applications we had in the last 9 months, you'd be surprised. 1. ADUs, a few dozens a year. Again, that's not gonna take us, you know, anywhere. I really think that the upzoning is not a solution as well, as land will get more expensive and units will be more expensive. I truly believe that we really have to get real and acquire land or build on our own land, building up with other entities or getting funds from state, county, federal to build affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you all to all the candidates for your answers to the first question. We'll now move on to the second question, which is as follows. Pedestrians and bicyclists of all ages continue to be killed or injured by larger vehicles on Palo Alto streets. How can Palo Alto improve safety for bicyclists, pedestrians, and other road users? The first candidate to answer this question will be Brian. Brian?
Yeah, I think that the first way to address this is to reduce the amount of traffic. And one of the best ways to do that is to have more housing so that people aren't commuting into the city in a car, and maybe they could be biking to work. And we could just reduce the number of cars on the road. I think that would be the most meaningful way to impact it. Beyond that, I think adding more bike lanes. I mean, Palo Alto is already a very bikeable city. I bike pretty much everywhere here, but adding more bike lanes is always a way to address that. There's also something that was brought up on our forum last night, which was the separation of parked cars from the side of the road, which apparently is a pretty good way to keep pedestrians out of harm's way. So I would be in favor of all of those ideas.
Thank you, Brian. The next candidate to answer this question will be Ed.
Thanks. Yes, there are a lot of industry practices that can do that, like separated lanes and so on. But the thing I want to talk about is that some of these practices don't have to be put in place. You can do these on a very simple basis, which is let's enforce the speed limits. And let's do that by putting the traffic cops back on that were cut, as they shouldn't have been, in the 2020 budget. Because speeding has just gone crazy around here, even in low speed zones. I had a meeting yesterday with some neighbors, and a lady said, "I'm just so thankful every afternoon when my daughter gets home," meaning she's not sure that they're going to get home. Now that's a crisis that we can't wait 10 years to fix to get housing built or mechanical things. That's something that needs an urgency now. This year on the Planning Commission, we prioritize as number one, looking at intersections that are high risk and have had some collisions and taking emergency action on that. I checked again on that last night at our meeting, and it's coming to us soon. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate will be Julie.
Well, I agree with everybody. I think that we need housing near transit and to expand cycling as a lifestyle, as a matter of wellness, and as a transportation solution. I was excited to learn more about separating parked cars from the road with painted bike lanes and a second curb in our prior forum. I'm also really excited about TDM solutions, transportation demand management. These are options where big employers like Stanford really incentivize employees to utilize transportation other than cars. I know that our Office of Transportation was recently given a 2-year pilot grant to fund an on-demand shuttle. I'd like to see the shuttle come back somehow. My big idea is to get hundreds of parents out of hundreds of cars in pickup and drop-off lines at our middle, elementary, and high schools. Parents should be either at home or at work or enjoying life, but not in a car emitting all of these greenhouse gas emissions. I'd like to see a pilot, perhaps with Palo Verde, because the displacement already underway, of a shuttle taking kids from a place near their home to their school, maybe even get Stanford on board as a partner because of Nixon and Escondido. Thank you.
Next up will be Doria.
Thank you. So, well, simply put, it's the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. And I think we do the most we can to engineer, given staff time and funds, to engineer good bike lanes in Palo Alto, but they could always be better. Understand that some streets can't hold a separated bike lane. They're just not wide enough. Another thing that I think we need to do, Ed mentioned this, is restore our safety professionals. They've been cut 30%, 30% reduction in staffing over the last 15 years. It wasn't just COVID. And I think we also need to realize, and this is a hard problem, but there's a national trend of car and bicycle problems with larger vehicles. And it's really thought that it's due to distraction. So as much as we can, we have to get people off their distracting devices when they're operating large vehicles.
Keep going.
Oh, sorry, especially around people on foot and on bikes, especially children. I've seen 2 kids hit right near my house. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up will be Vicki.
Well, I think we all agree that we need more protected bike lanes, that paint is not enough, whether it's something dividing it or the European style raised bike lanes, which can have its own challenges with respect to street width, but something that's more protective. And I think we should pay more particular attention to thoroughfares like El Camino and Middlefield for kids that are biking to school. They need adequate time to cross these large intersections and perhaps more crossing guards there that can help them. For example, I know someone who watched a girl get knocked over on her bike and the crossing guards are unable to come assist them. We need to figure out some other solution so that they can get safely out of the road when that happens. Maybe we have lights that allow bikes to cross a few seconds ahead of cars so that the bicyclists can get ahead, and we don't want another child killed on their bike by trucks turning right. And of course, there's a grade separation that would get trains away from bikes and pedestrians. And I think we can do a lot to improve bikes and pedestrians connections across Alma before the whole grade separation happens.
Thank you. Next up will be Alex.
Yes, I mainly agree with almost everyone when it comes to bike safety. Grade separation is definitely the largest project that will handle when it comes to transportation and bike routes, and I'm glad to see solutions that will separate pedestrians and bikes from cars. So far, it looks like the underpasses or the partial underpasses will solve that. Also, programs like Safe System. I have a son that bikes on El Camino to Mayfield twice a week, right on by California, where a kid got killed 2 years ago. So definitely programs like Safe System should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. The last candidate to answer this question will be Lisa.
I love this topic. There's a lot of good ideas we've heard tonight. I boiled it down to 3 main priorities. Number 1, we have an opportunity to separate bicyclists and pedestrians from Alma and the Caltrain tracks at the railway crossings at Meadow, Charleston, Churchill, and Palo Alto Ave. We need to pick a design for grade separations and allocate the funds and get these projects going. Number 2, El Camino is owned and operated by the state. It's also one of the highest bike injury corridors in the area. I'd like to see Palo Alto enter into an agreement with Caltrans to remove dedicated parking and replace it with a dedicated bike lane, as well as some landscaping. Mountain View is pursuing this. I think if we're going to build housing along El Camino, we also need to make it nicer and greener and safer for bikes and pedestrians. And number 3, I think we should experiment with swapping parking or a vehicle lane along a few select routes in Palo Alto. And we should make sure that we prototype them first with paint and traffic cones and plastic bollards so we get community input before we pour concrete.
Thank you to all the candidates. We'll now move on to question number 3. Palo Alto has a well-documented history of segregation. Beyond racially restrictive covenants and redlining of the past, current zoning and land use policies perpetuate exclusion today. Particularly given the city's obligation under California state law to affirmatively further fair housing, how would you lead the city to pursue fair and equitable housing? The first candidate to answer this question will be Ed.
Okay, thank you. Yes, racial practices like redlining are legally over, which is not to say that awful racial bias is not still virtual. I think this one does come back to we need to prioritize the low-income BMR housing, and we just have to change the population of our town over time. The RENA number actually calls for 3,500 homes below moderate. It's a huge lift, but that many new homes for moderate incomes would change our population, and that's a good thing. We in the housing element on down, signed off on the 6,000 homes. Now we also have to do a lot of work to attract the landowners and the developers to build these. So there's just a lot of execution work that has to be done to make this happen. And the other thing, the last thing I want to mention is that housing needs need to be filled across the whole entire, throughout the entire city. That doesn't mean that there can't be big projects somewhere because there's land, but it has to be dispersed, no question. Thank you.
Next up will be Julie.
Really grateful for this question. Palo Alto's current comprehensive plan speaks of, quote, safeguarding existing single-family neighborhoods. And I have to ask, safeguarding from whom? Who are we protecting from whom? None of us here, but our predecessors in our beloved city used single-family zoning as a way to keep non-white people out. None of us is responsible for that. Yet we must reckon with it and seek to understand and dismantle its vestiges. That is why I feel in my heart that we have to spread our housing element equitably across all neighborhoods. None are exempt. None are so unique that they get to preserve their single family status while the rest carry the burden of greater density. The state predicts 5% of all single family homes will do SB 9 lot splits. Well, we have 15,000 single family homes. 5% is 750 units. The reason we don't have good utilization, as Alex pointed out, is we need a process like San Jose that has an ADU ally, ADU universal checklist, ADU Tuesdays for expedited approval, and pre-approved vendors. A number of our neighbors could use the income that will come from lot
Thank
splits.
you.
Better promotion and marketing will get our numbers up and help us meet our RENA obligations.
Next up will be Doria.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm glad that it's been decades since those heinous practices of redlining and that was a financial institution practice, it was never in zoning codes, that those things are illegal. They've been illegal for a long time. That being said, I do think we're losing a little bit of sight here of what's really going on. The city in the last few decades is, I believe, 43 or 44% minority. Before that, it was really all white. So we do have more diversity. And once again, the exclusionary problem in Palo Alto is the high cost of housing here. And it is just prohibitive for so many people. That being said, true affordable deed restricted housing is very, very hard to cobble together for providers that do that kind of thing. The city does what it can and kicks in from our housing fund, which is created by impact fees. We have the biggest impact fees on commercial to make our housing fund of any city around here.
Thank you. Next up will be Vicki.
So during my 20 years with the Law Foundation, we've always had a focus on fair housing. And we represented low-income tenants facing wrongful eviction or housing discrimination, which were usually race-based cases. And unfortunately, our services were always in demand. But during that time period, housing became increasingly unaffordable. So we added legal support for renter organizing. And one example of that is the 5 years that we represented the tenants of the Buena Vista Mobile Home Park right here in Palo Alto and succeeded in saving that source of housing and the community who calls it home. Going forward, we need to root out any remaining racial covenants in today's deeds. They're still there, unenforceable or not, they are in there and they shouldn't be. We need to invest in amenities like parks, libraries, and community centers throughout the city, not just in wealthier neighborhoods. Developing new area plans with a mix of housing so residents of different affordable housing enjoy parks, shopping, and dining alongside their neighbors in market rate housing. Let's try to do that with North Ventura.
Thank you. Next up will be Alex.
Yes, I would have to say that I don't see the zoning, the RR zoning to be an issue. That's why, I'm being a data driven. I wanted to dig more a bit into SB 9. I was actually perplexed that only one active application will have in 9 months. As soon as, just like upzoning, as soon as you change the zoning, to allow more density or more favorable, anything favorable for development, the land becomes more expensive. The land is so expensive in the middle of Palo Alto, and that's what prevents people actually to go ahead and create more units. And also we have more units through ADUs. Even Jonathan earlier today said, we don't have a mechanism in place to track how many of those ADUs are being used for housing. I bet half of them are being used for home offices. I think we really have to look on for
Thank you.
different.
Thank you. Next up will be Lisa.
Thanks. I appreciate this question. So affirmatively furthering fair housing practice requires that we consider protected characteristics and really determine who lacks access to opportunity and think about how to provide that opportunity. And I was thinking about one of the biggest opportunities we have to offer here in Palo Alto is our excellent schools. And I think it's really important to offer access to all of our schools. And I was thinking about, we have 12 elementary schools spread throughout the city, and I think we really should actively aim to build new housing in each of the enrollment areas of each of the elementary schools. And I agree with Julie, we should make it super easy to add ADUs and make SB 9 lot splits, including perhaps revisiting some ordinances we have that currently make it more difficult to develop your own property there. And finally, I agree with others who have mentioned we really need to focus on the very low income affordable housing, because there's a high correlation between low income communities and communities of color, and we need to be welcoming to these folks into our community.
Thank you, Lisa. The last candidate to answer this question will be Brian.
Yeah, I think from the time when I was growing up in Palo Alto, I think that actually diversity has improved dramatically. I think that what's really facing the city now is its economic diversity, and the solution for that is going to be affordable housing. And it needs to be across the city, not just in downtown and traffic corridors. It should be everywhere, but at the same time, I don't think that it necessarily means that we need to threaten single family neighborhoods to do it.
Thank you, Brian. That concludes the third question. We'll now move on to the fourth question, which is as follows. Palo Alto has explicitly made climate action a priority for the city. With so many people unable to afford a home here and commuting to Palo Alto by car each workday, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the city. In your view, what specific new policies would you pursue to reduce and eventually eliminate the carbon footprint of transportation in Palo Alto? The first candidate to answer this question will be Julie.
Well, Governor Newsom has just declared that by 2035, I believe it is, no new cars sold in California may contain gas. So the future is coming. And of course, as Palo Altans, we want to be in the lead on ushering in that future. I think this is where workforce housing is essential. As we're thinking about who's going to have access to these units we're going to build, one of my thoughts is asking Stanford to partner with us off in their non-academic space to build housing for their laborers and for non-Stanford laborers. Other universities have done this, like Middlebury. No reason we can't ask our big university to partner with us to do the same. So that's probably the biggest solution for me, that and the shuttle to get kids to and from our public schools to get hundreds of parents out of hundreds of cars.
Thank you, Julie. Next up will be Doria.
Thank you. So of course, electrification is a huge thing, and said it before, but we're going to have to make sure our local grid and the state grid are equipped and up to speed to produce and deliver green electricity. Another thing is we have to really appreciate, and I don't think we can fully evaluate this at this time, but the work at home, the change that work at home is made. And we should maybe be thinking about having standards for work at home. I mean, the air was much cleaner during COVID. We still haven't got, anecdotally, I don't think we have data on it, but it seems like we don't have all those commuter workers coming still. So, and we have a lot of jobs in the tech sector, and those are definitely jobs where people can work at home. So I think that it will be one of the big things. And I also agree that housing on Stanford in the Stanford Research Park is a better use than continuing the large office trend there with our last million.
Thank you. Next up will be Vicki.
All right, well, to eliminate or reduce the carbon footprint of transportation, I kind of want to meet people where they are. And I think about sort of a cascading set of ideas. So first, I want to do everything we can to encourage bike and pedestrian transit for those who are able to move that way. For those who can't walk or bike, let's advocate with VTA and see if we can get some better bus service and consider whether reinstating our shuttle makes sense. For those who drive, let's make EV charging more readily available throughout the city so we can charge on non-peak hours, which is greener, instead of everyone plugging in when they get home. And for those who commute out of town, let's provide housing near public transit, such as in our 2 downtowns, which provides safe, walkable routes to those train stations. And it also will help revitalize those downtowns. So I want to see a menu of things to reduce our carbon footprint.
Thank you. Next up is Alex.
Yes, I would like I would love to say that affordable housing, next to current transit areas, will fix the problem. However, we're talking about 2, 3, 4,000 units, and we have 100K of people driving to Palo Alto every day. So that will reduce, unfortunately, the carbon print by 2, 3, 4%. The answer, I believe, is really the gray separation project. And that will move thousands and tens of thousands of people a day. If you were to meet someone in downtown Burlingame for coffee, and if you have an electric train available every 15 minutes, and you don't want to deal with parking in downtown Burlingame, guess what? You will take that train instead of driving. If you live in Sunnyvale and you work for Tesla, guess what? If you have access to the train and an electric scooter from the train station, you will do that. So that's the answer.
Thank you. Next up is Lisa.
So definitely walking and biking wherever possible. Let's locate the new housing close to jobs and schools. Make sure we add new bike paths with new development. Not everybody can walk or bike. Sometimes it's too far. Let's invest in public transit. Bring back the crosstown shuttle. Let's start an on-demand shuttle. Let's do whatever Palo Alto can do to help unify regional transit so people traveling regionally don't have to navigate 27 different regional transit agencies to get around the Bay Area. For those who need a car, let's make it electric. I think the role of city government in promoting electric vehicles is definitely equitable access to EV charging. On the Utilities Commission, I've advocated for a long time to subsidize and encourage EV charging in apartment complexes, public spaces, and workplaces. And I'm really pleased to see the city making progress on these fronts. We currently have programs in various states of progress to give EV charging access to over 4,000 multifamily households and several local employee parking lots. So I'm really excited to see those move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is Brian.
It really seems like the answer to almost every single question that we're being asked, but I think housing, and especially affordable housing, is part of the solution. Get people closer to where they're working so that they don't have to commute into the city. Beyond that, I think that electric scooters also can fill the role the cars play for if it's just a little bit too far to walk. I think that's a great idea that I believe is being implemented as we speak. Also, adding more charging stations for electric vehicles definitely would help. I think that when the shuttle was eliminated, I was definitely disheartened by that because I have used the shuttle pretty much my entire life here. I used it to get to school when I was in middle school at Jordan. And then later when I was working downtown, I would take the shuttle and I didn't even own a car. So I think that that's a great service that needs to be restored.
Thank you. The last candidate to answer this question will be Ed.
Yep, thanks. Again, the long-term solution is to get lower priced rentals here so that nobody has to leave town. They're already here. But I think the other emphasis besides shuttles and so on is that we need to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, which is as important as the number of cars, because if cars are kept for a weekend trip or taking people to the soccer game across town, that's fine. We just don't want them to be used all the time. So some of the standard things that we already have need to be beefed up. For example, TDM programs, but we should put teeth in that. There's some consequences if they're not met. And we should require businesses to join the TMA downtown. Definitely continue to encourage work from home. And the electric vehicle thing is already on its way, but naturally, to the extent that we can actually legislate that rehabbing of buildings, commercial and residential should include
10
EV
seconds.
chargers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for those answers. We'll now move on to question number 5. Keeping the dual goals of inclusive neighborhoods and sustainability in mind, where should Palo Alto prioritize new development? Downtown, Cal Ave, El Camino Real, San Antonio, near train stations or freeways, on city-owned parking lots, in Stanford Research Park, in Cumberland, all of the above, somewhere else? In short, where should homes go and why? The first candidate to answer this question will be Doria.
Thank you. So to even hope to meet the RHNA goal with that many units, we're going to have to put housing in a lot of different places. Definitely downtown, definitely San Antonio. We're seeing some interest there already. El Camino, yes. The key, and Stanford Research Park, I've already mentioned that. The key to doing all of this is doing it the right way. And that means the right kind of projects in the right locations, and ones that don't have unintended negative consequences, and ones where the amenities and the livability of those units will be the same as current residents of Palo Alto. As far as SB9, I don't know. I think that's a wild card. I don't think anybody knows how many units it's going to produce. So far, there's been one SB9 project in Palo Alto that created $7 or $8 million. I wouldn't call them mansions, but unachievable for most people. So we're going to have to do something besides that. Another thing is that cities don't build.
Thank you.
Developers do.
Thank you, Vicki. Or apologies. Thank you, Doria. Next up is Vicki.
All right. Well, I think homes need to go just about everywhere. To have inclusive neighborhoods and promote sustainability, we should spread new housing throughout the city. That puts us closer to the equity goals we've been talking about. And it meets the different needs of the different people who we will welcome to Palo Alto. So some are going to move here for schools and want to be in our beautiful established neighborhoods where ADUs and JADUs can add to the housing stock so that they have safe, walkable routes to schools. And I agree with the comments made earlier that we should streamline approval of those ADUs and JADUs. Others may have a family member who works in a different city and they want to be near a train station or a carpool lot. So they want to be downtown in dense housing. So downtown, Cal Ave and El Camino all make sense, including on city-owned parking lots. And I think we should also explore making housing a permitted use at Stanford Research Park. But I believe there's some existing leases that'll make that a challenge in the near term.
Thank you. Next up is Alex.
Yes, I think, yeah, like everyone says, pretty much all of the above. El Camino Real, San Antonio, Fabian Way, obviously near transit stations and freeways. City-owned properties, yes, I would like to see a mixed use there. I think the city would have the opportunity to create some retail, maybe office, and then, you know, multifamily on top. So we can promote some retail there as well on the bottom floor. But I believe Cumberland, we talked about that yesterday. Stanford Research Park and Stanford in general, I think we should partner up with Stanford 100%. I'm not super keen on downtown and California Avenue. If you have a tenant in downtown and if you force a developer to do housing, we'll end up, as we've seen, with 2 $7 million penthouses on top of.
Thank you, Alex. The next candidate will be Lisa.
Yeah, so the question where to build, I'm definitely in all of the above, gal. Downtown transit area, Cumberland, El Camino, San Antonio, SB9 lot splits. I think we take a close look everywhere in town. I'm open to housing above retail in the Stanford Shopping Center, around Town and Country, downtown. I'd be very interested in converting the Stanford Research Park As I mentioned earlier, for me, a goal is to have new development feeding into every single elementary school. One of the things we really need to work on is the very low income housing. It's the hardest to finance because the rents are the lowest. So as a city, we really need to actively help these projects come to life, allocate city-owned land, allocate city financing, partner with nonprofits, and then hopefully we can apply for state and federal dollars to bring those projects to life.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is Brian.
I think in general, the answer is everywhere. And by putting the housing throughout the city, we can not just have to rely on big developments of apartments, and we can just have it kind of spread out and be more natural and not overwhelm the infrastructure, and the quality of life doesn't need to decline. And I think that wherever we're considering needs to listen to the local residents that already live there and really hear their concerns and make sure that it fits that neighborhood in that area. But in general, I think this question's already been answered by the housing element, which lists out exactly where housing should go. And I'm supportive of all of those locations.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Ed. Ed?
Sorry, it was off there for a minute. They are all itemized in the housing element, and we spent, now a year and a half in the working group getting there. It was a really great group and worked really hard on it. Downtown transit is an obvious place to put it, but there's only 2 places where there's downtown transit. But that said, because of that, we should be looking at downtown on Cal Ave and University Avenue. And the council at the end kind of canceled out one of the projects that was Stanford-owned near 27 University for a lot of history reasons, and they wanted to do a downtown plan. I'd rather see that happen in parallel. Otherwise, Stanford won't step up from their commitment of 569 units in the next 10 years. And I don't think we should wait to 10 years to start planning the next cycle, just to see what can come out. So currently, Stanford Research Park and Coventry are not included. They could easily be included. And there's nothing fixed about the current 687. We can switch them back and forth, and that can still be reconsidered. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. And the last candidate to answer this question will be Julie.
I want to start by acknowledging Doria's work and Ed's work and the work of all who have put the housing element together. I have been poring over it, and I'm struck by how many of the spots allocated are some kind of parking lot owned by us or somebody else. We're trying to add 6,000 units of inventory to a city that has 26,000 units right now. That's roughly a quarter. My feeling is a rising tide of expectation should lift all boats, which is why I'm advocating for them to be spread out. The tools the state is offering us with SB 9, as I and others have mentioned, but also AB 803, which is the Starter Home Revitalization Act, are meant to help us do this. The beautiful thing about both of these is they help the missing middle
10 seconds
in a gentle way, in largely compatible ways with it, to build things that are largely compatible with the neighborhood. And I think that's super important for preserving character.
Thank you to all the candidates for those answers. We'll now move on to question 6. Research shows that about 80% of people experiencing homelessness are from the county where they currently reside, and that high rents and a shortage of housing dramatically increases the risk of homelessness. How should the city better help keep people in their homes and help unhoused residents become housed? Specifically, what is your position on safe parking, interim housing, and permanent supportive housing in Palo Alto? And the first candidate to answer this question will be Vicki.
Well, thank you. And thank you for this question. It's really important. Helping people experiencing homelessness is a moral imperative for any community. So many of the unhoused are there through no fault of their own, and skyrocketing housing costs recently have made it far worse. And so many people are in much more tenuous circumstances. So I support the safe parking programs that the city has implemented recently. I think that's the least we can do. I am glad I don't have to spend the night in my car with my child. They have supportive services. They have a great success rate getting people into permanent housing, and they have security things. I support those. I also support and have volunteered at programs for interim housing like Hotel de Zinc. I think those are wonderful. And I'm delighted that we got more funding for Project Home Key transitional housing. And I hope to be able to serve on council next year to make sure we get it built. That has great supportive services and also with the goal of getting people into permanent housing.
Thank you. Next up will be Alex.
Yes, I believe that we have to listen to community members when it comes to addressing, the safe parking, interim housing, and permanent supporting housing as well. I do believe that we need to have processes in place, in order to address all of the issues that we have as we speak. But, as Vicki mentioned, Home Key project is addressing some of that. Hopefully we can implement that at Cobberly. And the long-term solution is definitely the affordable housing for the very low-income people. So I think that should be the focus of our city, to make sure that we
10 seconds.
long-term view instead of just addressing the current issues that we are dealing with.
Thank you, Alex. Next up will be Lisa.
Thanks for this question. Homelessness is a local problem and a regional problem. I want Palo Alto to do its share in solving it. On safe parking, I wish we didn't need it, but until we have enough apartments for people to live in, I support safe parking programs. I support interim housing, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing. We're going to have people who outgrow the need for services in a short time and others who will need support services permanently. As a community, we need to provide options. The Opportunity Center on Encina Ave in Palo Alto is a great example of affordable housing with support services, and we need a few more projects like that. The Project Turnkey Transitional Housing Project on San Antonio Road will be an asset to the community, I think. Although I do hope we can find better locations for future transitional housing projects. And there are also people experiencing homelessness that don't need support services. These community members just need a place to live.
Thank you.
Long term, I think we could keep people in their homes if we just had enough homes.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up will be Brian.
Yeah, once again, I think that long-term, the solution is affordable housing. I think that also long-term, with the Cobberly project underway, we could get some nonprofits that could also help a lot of the unhoused. I think that the PrEP program that the police department is doing, it could definitely help those that are unhoused due to mental illness and help them find somewhere to live. I'm not necessarily in favor of the safe parking program because I've slept in a car before and it's not comfortable. That's not a solution to me. I don't think it's a temporary, and it's definitely not a long-term solution. And I think that by offering that, it might make us get complacent and not try to find a real solution to this problem. So for that and other reasons, I'm not necessarily a fan of the safe parking program.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Ed.
Thank you. Yes, I do support safe parking. It's necessary and it's humanitarian. I started working on homelessness about 20 years ago when I first joined Palo Alto Urban Ministry as a board member. And we quickly realized that the best thing we could do was to get this into another organization. So 3 of us merged it into Envision, and then that merged into Life Moves. And as we were doing that, we got the Opportunity Center underway and also Hotel de Zinc. So I go back a long way on this one, and it's a heartfelt issue. I think that Home Key is phenomenal. We finally got some money from the state, 24 million, that's good. And I'm deliriously happy about this, but we have to understand that what this is, as it says, interim services. And each person is going to have a different set of needs and services. It's only 6 months, so all these issues have to be solved for the individual to get them back on their feet. And we don't want to get too high on our expectations and try to redefine that. But it's phenomenal. So thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Next up is Julie.
Many young people don't realize that our present day condition we call homelessness was really begun during the Reagan administration with some policy choices made then. When I was an undergraduate at Stanford in the late 80s, I did my first research project trying to put together a census of how many homeless people we had in the surrounding area. I am thrilled by the New Baylands Transitional Housing Partnership that we have achieved with the county, Life Moves, and Project Home Key. I've met with Life Moves about this. It's very exciting. We have a count of about 300 unhoused people in our city. And with, I think it's 88 transitional beds, I'm probably a little off, but the new facility with folks being transitioned in there and then out to permanent affordable housing, we really have a chance to lick this thing in terms of our local population in a matter of a few years. In the meantime, yes to safe parking. And also I'm pleading for an attitude adjustment, not for many of y'all, but there are people in our city who really demonize folks who have no better option than to sleep in their car. I've heard them referred to as car campers. That is the most insulting thing.
Thank you.
Camping is a choice. Living in your car is a last resort.
Thank you. And the last candidate to answer this question will be Doria.
Thank you. So I totally support safe parking, transitional or interim housing, and permanent supportive housing. I served on an ad hoc on PTC a few years ago to look at affordable housing, to understand more about it and how we can get more of it. It's very challenging. One thing to remember is that Palo Alto is sort of a leader in this field. We were the first city in California to have inclusionary housing, where we require for multifamily housing a percentage to be below market rate. We have an 8 to 9% of our housing is affordable housing, deed restricted housing, which is much higher than most cities. We also have somewhere between 2,300 and 2,600 units, according to SV at Home, actually, in Palo Alto, of affordable deed restricted housing, with Mountain View having about 1,400. And we also have the highest commercial impact fee, which is how we get money to give to projects like Wilton Court and Buena Vista. 100% affordable.
Thank you. Thank you, Doria. Thank you to all the candidates. We'll now move on to our second to last question. The current city council has endorsed a series of policies providing greater protections to renters. What are your views on these efforts? And in your first year on council, how should Palo Alto further protect renters from the harms of rent burden, overcrowding, displacement, and the risk of homelessness? And on this question, we'll start with Alex.
Yeah, so before I became a homeowner, I used to rent for almost a decade, and I know how it feels to rent. I remember days where I was afraid to change anything in the house, or to hang a picture on the wall, because I was afraid to damage the walls, to patch them when I was about to leave. I believe the biggest effort that the city should be focused on, it comes down to affordable housing for very, very low income people. If the city ends up on its portfolio with 1,000+ affordable housing units, then the city could stabilize the rental market and also address the displacement of the renters as well.
10 seconds.
I truly believe that long-term, that's a solution for protecting renters and stabilizing the market as well.
Thank you, Alex. Next up will be Lisa.
So let's see, I fully support the rental survey or registry that was discussed the other night at Policy and Services. I think it should apply to all rental housing, including everything from our large complexes to our 2,800 single family homes that are rented currently in town. We definitely need to collect data on the unit and its characteristics, as well as the rent. It needs to be updated whenever the status of the unit changes. And of course, the data should only be shared with the public in aggregate. Privacy for both landlords and tenants is very important. So I think that's an important first step, because we need good data to make good policy decisions. As for other priorities, I take my cues from the Palo Alto Renters Association. Palo Alto should definitely prioritize public education to renters about their existing rights, including AB 1482 that limits rent increases on many properties, the 1-year lease requirement, tenant relocation assistance, mediation and tenant landlord disputes, zero
Thank you.
tolerance policy for tenant harassment. And I will stop
Thank
there
you,
because I'm out of town.
Next up is Brian.
Yeah, I actually, I have concerns about the rental registry that's been passed. I think that it is an administrative burden, and it's almost similar to how the big tech companies that reside in our cities deal with data, and that's just collect all the data you can, and we'll figure out how we're going to use it later. And I think that that's a poor mentality for a business or for a city. I think we should have a purpose for why a specific purpose for what we're trying to discover from this data, and I don't think that we have that yet. I think it's more of just collect it and we'll figure it out later. I also think that it is very private information, and since data leaks are so common, it's just dangerous to be collecting if we don't have a reason for it. I think that better solutions would be the educating renters about their current rights. Relocation assistance is definitely critical. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Next up is Ed.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully support these renter protections. At PTC, we reviewed and passed 6 renter protections and passed them along to council, with the cornerstone being the rent registry, which I supported. And as we know, it passed 2-to-1 in policy and services. It hasn't gone to council yet. In today's weekly, I'm actually quoted from that meeting of arguing with another commissioner about the issue of relocation assistance for no fault eviction on buildings down to 10 units. Felt very strongly that we needed to do that. He had a spurious argument, and that it was going to be built into the rents from the beginning. Maybe I helped get that vote because it was 4-to-1. And Doria and others went along with me, and we got that. The main thing that we should focus on going forward, in addition to getting the rest of these things vetted with council,
10 seconds.
is that the renters need more information about their rights. And Santa Clara County isn't doing that job. At some point, we may have to take it over or ask for help from Stanford Law School.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. The next candidate will be Julie.
Good job, Ed and Doria. I'm happy to hear that that happened. 46% of our neighbors rent, and I've talked to a lot of them, and they feel largely unseen and maybe a little uncared about, and I think we can do better. I was pleased to attend a presentation of SV at Home, an anti-displacement presentation, where I was delighted to learn that Palo Alto is actually doing better by its renters than many Santa Clara County cities. That said, when you compare us to the Bay or to the state, we tend to lag. So look, renters have taught me they need to be protected, they want their communities preserved, and they need more housing produced, the 3 Ps. I am very in favor of a renter registry. It's almost like a unionization opportunity in that they're collectively learning who rents, what does it cost, what are the rent hikes, who are the landlords, what's the duration of terms. I also want to see a cap on security deposits, right to counsel, just cause eviction loophole extended to units built in the last 15 years, relocation assistance, 101 replacement.
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Doria.
Hi, thanks. I actually thought that the PTC recommended 9, not 6 to council. Anyway, whichever number it is, it was not enough even, because renters are treated badly in the city. I always like to say, I don't think we count, I think we undercount renters because there's so many casual renting situations. I live close to Stanford. There's always been people that rented out rooms in their house. They don't get counted. So for sure, we need to start with the rental survey program. I've attended a couple of PARA meetings just to kind of see what, if they were coming up with different ideas than staff and the PTC recommended to council. We seem in sync, and I think the rental registry is key. It should happen first, and I think it will be used in a lot of good ways. I don't think we'll have a problem. The problem with the 1-year lease is it is not enforced by the city, and renters do not have the time to sue their landlords in a civil case based on not being given a 1-year lease. There's very much insecurity for renters.
Thank you. And the last candidate to answer this question will be Vicki.
All right. Well, the question asks what we think of the series of policies providing greater protections to renters. And I think they're great. Because like I said, throughout those 20 years, our Fair Housing Law Project was never not busy. This is serious stuff. Renters get taken advantage of all the time. So to prevent that, I also support the renter registry and survey program and think we can improve it. If we track rents and rent increases, we can ensure compliance with AB 1482's rent cap. We can track eviction notices so that we can see how many are occurring and what kind of problems we're facing. We can enforce we'll at least know about whether that 1-year minimum lease law is being honored, and if not, figure out some ways to enforce it. So I think it could be quite useful. On rent increases, I support the law that caps it annually, but 10% is an awful lot every year. And so I'm willing to look at something that's a more reasonable increase.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our final question, which continues the topic of renters from a slightly different angle. Nearly half of Palo Altans are renters. However, renters are underrepresented on the boards, on the commissions, and on the councils, which discuss and decide housing policy. So beyond the policies that we just discussed, how can the city empower renters to have a more proportionate voice and advocate on their own behalf? We'll start with Brian.
Yeah, I think that comes down to just the changing of focus for especially the city council in terms of picking the commissions and making that a goal to have more diversity in terms of homeowners versus renters as being part of the commissions. And I think that would have a trickle down effect. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Ed.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to make a safe prediction that the rental market is going to go over 50% real soon, because they're already strong, and that's going to be the likely thing that attracts people to come in when we put up some of this affordable housing. So I think there's already a lot of clout there. I think that council is going to pay attention. They already are. So I think the news is good on that one. And I think the Renter Association is doing great to help with that visibility. You're getting a lot more attendance and visibility. And at one point, you had an event and only Councilmember Stone and I showed up. And the last one I went to was jam-packed. So I think there's good progress there. Right now, council actually does have 2 of 7 members that are renters, but that's not the point. The point is that you are visible, and I would really encourage you to run for commissions and to run for council.
Thank you, Ed. Next up is Julie.
I agree that we need to have renters on the PTC and on council and really in every level of leadership in our city. But I'm going to speak to a slightly bigger issue, which is when an entity like a city or a company or a nonprofit has systemically excluded people from participation by failing to notice them, which is sort of the situation we find ourselves in with renters. We don't just add them into our existing commissions and committees and councils. We have to do the brave work of asking ourselves, why has this not mattered as much until now? And what are we going to do to really acknowledge that so we can have confidence that we have rebuilt a system, an organization that is inherently desirous of being inclusive of renters?
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Doria.
Oops, thank you very much. Listen, I live very close to El Camino and College Terrace. A lot of my neighbors are renters. I'm 100% aware that some renters are here for a short time, either for work or Stanford. Others rent their whole lives here. So and I'm very proud that my neighborhood association absolutely is for everybody who lives in the neighborhood, not just for homeowners. And we always reach out to renters back in the day when I was on it, specifically because we feel really lucky to get a renter involved. Definitely there should be more renters on boards and commissions. But I'm pleading with renters, apply for these things. You are just like us. You are a community, you are neighbors. There's no difference. And so, in as much as we can encourage them and really ask them also to apply, So I think that's the
10
main thing.
seconds.
That's just the main thing. Gotta treat everybody the same.
Thank you. Next up is Vicki.
Yeah, so, as people have said, we should try to appoint renters to these boards and commissions, encourage them to apply so that their lived experience has a voice. But then we need to make sure that when they're on those boards, the environment is such where they feel that they can use that voice and they're welcome and valued. I think also the city should continue to partner with the Renters Association and maybe increase that, but hold neighborhood meetings with renters and citywide forums about the rental market, experiences of renters, these laws we've been talking about, and actively solicit renters' views on policies that affect them. And I would say that that's not just housing policy, but apropos of this forum, that's also safe routes to schools, transportation, nearby services, and more. So I would encourage a holistic engagement with our rental community.
Thank you. Next is Alex.
Yeah, I thought that Greer is the only renter in the city council. Just as renters are making for 46% of the city, 35% is also immigrants as well. So I would like to see potentially more representation of on both. Maybe if I get elected, I would try to recruit 2 immigrants that are renters as well. The other thing is the campaign reform. These people, cannot afford to be relocated. And now we are expecting them to raise 50 to 100K to compete for a city council race. They are simply not in a position to do that. Some of them have been here for a year or 2 or 3 or 4. They are not connected. They cannot raise the money that some candidates are raising. They could run a grassroots campaign, but that's not going to
10 seconds.
Get elected. So a campaign reform is also a barrier for these renters to enter the race. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last candidate to answer will be Lisa.
I think it would be great to actively recruit renters to be on boards and commissions. Reach out through the Renters Association, reach out through other communities with a lot of renters, and don't just advertise the open positions, but ask the community leadership, like, who would be good at this? And then reach out to those individuals and say, hey, I heard, I got a recommendation that you'd be great on this board or commission. I think you should apply. And also, just to be clear, I'm not saying city staff should do this. I think we should do this. City council members appoint commissioners and board members to advise them, and they should be actively involved in recruiting a mix of people. I remember when I was applying to the Utilities Commission, I emailed a bunch of city council members and asked if I could find out more. One of them replied. I went to coffee with Liz Niss. She told me all about the commission, and it inspired me to go ahead with the application and try to do it. And I think we need to support the board and commission members when they get there so that they succeed. That's building the bench for city council. All the things I just said though, it should also apply to just recruiting directly for people to run for city council.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all the candidates for those thoughtful answers. That concludes the Q&A portion of this forum. To end this event, we'd like to invite each of the candidates to share a 1-minute closing statement, starting with Alex.
So, super. First of all, thank you for hosting the event. I'm an open-minded person, data-driven, using common sense. I listen, I adapt, and I'm here to serve the community. The future of Palo Alto is really at stake here, and 80% of the city council issues are land use related, and that's precisely the expertise I bring to the table. I think city council could benefit from my land use expertise, my balanced approach to housing. We'll be talking about housing all day long, and my commitment to a non-partisan focus. If you would like to see a more united, decisive, and efficient city council, please join me in moving the city forward. Again, thank you for hosting, and thank you all the candidates for participating.
Thank you. Next up will be Lisa.
I want to say thank you to the SV at Home Action Fund, the Palo Alto Forward, Palo Alto Renters Association, Destination Home, Housing Choices, Greenbelt Alliance, San Jose, Silicon Valley, NAACP, and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Collectively, thank you for hosting this evening. The format and especially the translation services are great. Well done. Thank you, fellow candidates, for your thoughtful comments, and thanks especially everyone who came to listen. If you're here, it means you're interested in some of the most important issues facing our city, and I'm glad we were able to share this time. I believe my unique background, including my service on the Utilities Commission, my professional background at the intersection of art, technology, and management, my roots in the community, my degrees from Stanford, and my attitude uniquely prepare me to serve on the City Council. I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is Brian.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of the organizations that put this together. Housing is definitely the critical issue that's facing Palo Alto right now, and we need to get it right. So these kind of discussions are vital for that. Out of my graduating class at Pali, there was over 450 students, and I can count on one hand the number that are still living in Palo Alto. And that's not because they don't want to live in Palo Alto. They realize it's a great city to raise a family. It's just they can't do it. So we need to solve this problem. I think that my background, having lived in a number of different neighborhoods, having rented, having owned a home, makes me, and having been born and raised here, gives me a unique perspective that would be really valuable for council. And so I respectfully ask for your vote as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And next is Ed.
Thank you. I'd like to address my candidacy from the perspective of housing. My goal is new affordable homes in Palo Alto to make us look a lot more like America than Beverly Hills. And I'm not a candidate who at this point could only promise that you do something about housing, because I've obviously done it, and I told you about that tonight. Worked on specific solutions like the Palmer Fix and the Housing Improvement Program, and even earlier housing overlays on San Antonio. I don't have a learning curve on housing because I'm up to speed. You don't have to wonder if I'm going to fight bad projects, because I have. I fought furiously to kill the staff report for the new Ventura neighborhood that would have turned Ventura into an office park with a few houses tossed in. So bottom line, at this point, no candidate has the specific housing experience that I have in Palo Alto. And now I want the job to build housing, and that's up to council. So that's why I'm asking you to elect me to a seat in January. I'm just ready to tie on my tool belt and go to work.
Thank you.
So thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Next is Julie.
I'm going to quote from the New York Times, which called us out when it came to our hypocrisy. They said, people who say they are progressive liberals who believe in a more equal, diverse America, they show up to the marches and put in lawn signs about everyone being equal. But at the same time, they're actively fighting to keep their neighborhoods looking like they always have. Well, that happened here on my side of town on Maybell Avenue. And we got Maybell wrong. The next housing element is our opportunity to get it right and to prove who we are. I respectfully ask for your vote. I am extremely passionate on this issue. It is probably why I chose to run. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Doria.
Thank you. So one of my strongest values is my steadfast belief that the future of Palo Alto belongs primarily to the residents, all of them, not to developers who see the city in terms of profit. Residents do not want their homes overshadowed by imposing buildings. They do not want more polluting traffic, degraded open space, or stressed infrastructure. They do want a welcoming, walkable, and livable community. I want to make Palo Alto better for current and future residents. You've heard my views on a number of important issues. I have experience working on city issues. I'm qualified, committed, and independent, and I want to work for you. We're going to densify, that's not up for debate, but we must retain a livable city with excellent parks, schools, open spaces for present and future residents. I want that to be my legacy. Palo Alto, to me, is a community, not a commodity. And I want to thank SV at Home and all the groups that sponsored this forum this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Doria. And the last candidate will be Vicki.
I guess I get the final word. Well, I too want to thank all of the co-host organizations that put on this forum. I'm really glad that you're connecting housing, climate, transportation, and equity, because these are interrelated issues. And if we solve one while worsening the others, we are not necessarily better off. We need more holistic planning in this city, which is why we need to make better use of coordinated area plans and even review the city's comprehensive plan, of which the housing element is a part. I believe we can do it in a way that preserves dog parks and bike paths and the many things that residents in our different neighborhoods love about Palo Alto. But adding housing can't wait. It will take problem solving and persuasion to get to yes, and that is where my experience lies. I'm an attorney who litigated big cases and a mediator who settled them. I led state policy advocates to consensus on healthcare, another tough issue, and we now have a state law. I'm honored by a broad range of endorsements that you can see at vickiforcouncil.com. I'm spoiling for a chance to help Palo Alto move forward on housing, climate, transportation, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. That concludes the candidate portion of this forum. Thank you to each of the candidates for your thoughtful responses to some difficult questions. Recordings of this forum will be posted online to the SV at Home Action Fund's YouTube page. And before we sign off, Emily Ann Ramos from the SV at Home Action Fund has some important closing words.
Thank you to our moderator, Robert Chun from Palo Alto Forward. We're putting up a very simple 3-question poll, and we'd like to ask you to fill it out. We hope this forum has helped you learn about housing issues and the candidates and help you be more informed as a voter. Thank you to our moderator, the candidates, and our interpreters. Also, thank you to all our co-hosts working in and for the community and partnering with us on tonight's forum. I appreciate you all for sharing space with us and doing so respectfully. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.